Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's okay. I'm not even going to ask if everyone's well, because it has been a shit show this week. And I mean, there's no other way of describing it. Markets have been terrible to look at. And yeah, it's not been to be honest, I think this has been, worse than perhaps sort of, deep in the bear. I mean, things like FTX crash, Luna crash, and Three Arrows Capital, they were obviously worse because it was, kind of just crypto related, absolutely drove everything down, sentiment recovered. What we have here is arguably a global financial, I don't want to say crash just yet, it is a crash, bringing down crypto with it, but also this is supposed to be in a bull market, and we're constantly having that battle at the moment of, are we, aren't we? Where do we really sit in the cycle? Do we need to just sit on our hands, let the thing play out? And we're going to try and discuss some of those tonight, just to sort of, maybe alleviate some concerns that people may have with where we're going, but also just to make sure that we are taking the right level of risk management. And I'm not necessarily talking about, don't spend any more than you're willing to lose. We've kind of already committed to that right now. I'm talking about just how we sort of going through these next few steps, because when it's red like this, sometimes it is easier to just go to cash, but then you're always worried about catching a falling sword and missing the bottom, and we're going to try and just go over those sort of things. So we'll try and cover that. I really want to keep it short tonight because there's not really too much to say. We can keep on talking about how dark the markets are looking and what that's going to do and where we think things may turn around, but the reality of it is that right now we're in Donald Trump's hands. We're in where we're going with tariffs and what that is going to do. And the fact is that level of uncertainty is driving fear across all markets. And it's not just cryptocurrency exclusive. I would argue, actually, that Bitcoin has fared probably better than a lot of the other markets, but that doesn't mean it's going to continue to do that. So we'll have a look at that. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I didn't get any beforehand, so that should help speed things along. There is no poll tonight. I mean, as I said, they're down or really down. I mean, what's the point in polling just there? Stuart, how's the marathon prep going? Do you know what? Just before we jump in then, yeah, I'm only 2.5 weeks away from the marathon now. So I did my longest run on Sunday of the sort of training program. It was about 33 kilometers, which is just under 21 miles. Things are going well. I'm still trying to, see if I can get sub 4 hours. So sort of always pushing that, but I'm in what they call the tapering phase at the moment. So still training, but reducing the distance, and I get to eat whatever the hell I want, which is great. But I'll be looking forward to, I suppose, I would say Sunday the 27th is when I run it. So I'm going to be in agony on the 28th. Hopefully by May, I'll be looking forward to just not having to do this. Anyway, but yeah, thanks for asking. Let's jump straight in. And we can't hide from it. Okay, normally we have a look at the charts, but this is what we're seeing. Okay, it's the weekly. Just to summarize where we've been on the week. Now, I think notable mentions. Let's start off with the greens because there's so few of them. Sorry, I've got Leeds United game on in the background. It's only been going 3 minutes. Leeds always 1-0 up and I missed the goal. So yeah, brilliant. Fartcoin, absolutely defying everything at the moment. And I know some people in the group are into their memes and certainly have been looking at Fartcoin. And well played to you if you're actually playing it. I don't really have the courage to jump into any sort of alts at the moment, but meme coin's certainly not there. But what a great little performer it's been doing. I'm not sure what it's driving the narrative there, or if it's just a anti-establishment kind of move. But hey, liking what we're seeing, because across the rest of the board it is red, and it is generally double digits red on the week. I think the worst performers, we've got Trump, Lido, NIR, Jito, Immutable X. These are all around about the 27%. Tau at 13% or just under, which I know feels hard, but actually compared to a lot of the other ones, maybe not as bad. And Bitcoin, just up in the top left-hand corner at 9%. So single figures for Bitcoin. I'm trying to see if there's any others big names that are single figures. Kaz. So yeah, it's just not been a particularly great week. And I think most of us know that. And whilst I appreciate you all tuning in here and we've got lots to talk about, I would suggest that if this is discomforting for you, then just, enjoy the Easter holidays if you live in the UK. Go out, touch grass, enjoy the sunshine, kind of head in the sand sort of moment. And there's no shame in necessarily doing that if you're willing to ride out the losses there, because this isn't making pretty looking. And for someone that has their charts open pretty much 18 hours a day, it is not healthy, I can assure you on that one. But looking at the big picture now, three-day time frames, we can kind of see Bitcoin where it's been sitting. Now, we are 1.5 days into this 3-day candle, if you will. So it started yesterday, and we're kind of just a bit of an indecision. We've still got some time to go within it. But we went down as low as 74.5 yesterday in the depths of the drop. We did see a recovery up to 81,000, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But, even if we start seeing sustained recoveries, the reality of it is that until we get above that 87.5 and a close above it, there's not really too much for us to necessarily celebrate about. So, we've just got to bear that in mind. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but that's kind of where we sit within this. I'm not going to go too much into on the downside of where we maybe look at some targets. We'll cover that one later on. What was interesting, and it's on me in front of my face, so I'll move it, is Bitcoin dominance. It got to it. It hit 64. We talked about that level. I've talked about that level for weeks now. We finally hit it. Actually looking like a bit of a tasty high test off the back of that one. I'm not really trusting the high test at the moment, but what we can see is actually this is nearly 6 green 3-day candles in a row. So it's been 18 days of solid climbing right now, even though the market has been going down. And it's just showing that actually right now, even as we are struggling within the overall crypto market, Bitcoin, if you're going to be somewhere, is probably one of the safer places to be. We have a look at the total market. 3 and yeah, this is sort of getting now back to Trump pump levels. So 600 billion would be that level. I was just about to say we just lost 700 billion, but we've actually just climbed above it over the last 15 minutes or so, but for sort of a psychological level there. But actually we've lost the all-time high from March of last year, and we're now down below that. We did see a bit of an alt season in March, which is why that pumped higher and why we're seeing that total 3 is lower than March 2024, whereas Bitcoin's price still remains higher. But, we'll have a look at some levels as where that can be. And then sadly with Tau, where we are, it's, that waterfall of falling away there, 4 red 3-day candles in a row. We are seeing some movement today. And I mentioned in Discord, the fact that we kind of retested the August low down here, and we didn't get to it exactly, but we were in about $3 of it. It was a good bounce from that. And then, I don't know if Trump said something in the last hour or so, but the markets have kind of rolled over a bit again recently, and we're starting to fall away. It's now down actually nearly 4% on the day. And we'll have a look at, unfortunately, where I think some targets of that can be. Or I say unfortunately because some of the work we need to do to get back into some decent levels. But the quick shot of this is, these are just cut and copy lines that just sort of meet previous things. So way back in December, we were using just this train track here. It fell away, and I put this one in as sort of a level of resistance, and then it just cleanly fell from that. So actually, we need to get above that. Let's forget fibs. Let's forget EMAs and just look at this. And I would say, by the time we get back to it, unless it's a sharp V reversal, we are kind of looking at about 300 as a level we need to get sustained build up from that one. So bit of work to go from there, but we'll have a look at some of those targets later on. Chris, I will try and enjoy the taper. Yeah, sorry, that's just running related. Okay, so, unless you've lived under a rock, and hey, that was probably the best thing to do for the last week. What's been going on? It is, of course, this article has nothing to do with it, but talking about necessarily, but it's the Trump tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs that Donald Trump is launching. Now, I actually thought they went live last week, but I now actually believe it is live as of midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, 9th of April. Tomorrow they go live. He gave his press conference last week, and the reality was we knew these tariffs were coming. We didn't know how they were being, created, what level of severity and the speed in which they were going to be actioned. That all dropped last week, and that's what caused mass uncertainty and concern across the market. Now, yeah, okay, there is some certainty. We know who's getting the tariffs and at what price, but now the uncertainty relies on what is the wider effect of this effectively trade war? How long is it going to last for? And that's what's creating that fear across the markets. And there is just a flight for safety. That's what we're seeing right now, especially in the stock markets, flight for safety, probably just back into cash and see where we're going. Yeah, Mark's put reciprocal tariffs. It certainly doesn't seem very reciprocal. I mean, I've got a list of the tariffs a bit later on, and some of the countries, what they're getting hit with is unbelievable. So I lost my train of thought there. Don't matter. I can't remember what I was going to say. And it was interesting on Friday when the markets dropped, and we'll have a look at the charts in a moment. The NAS, the S&P closed incredibly red on the Friday, which is a really bad state of affairs. Simon kind of went over this as well. But, closing red on a Friday like that over such a, I don't know if we're calling it a black swan event yet. Well, only history will tell us whether it is, but certainly a grey swan event usually means that when the markets open on a Monday, it turns into a Black Monday event. And we did see further falling through Sunday night and into Monday. But everyone was talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin had actually managed to stabilize the ship a little bit. And, this always drives me a bit mad. But people are like, oh, well, we've disconnected from the stock market. I mean, give it a chance. It's 24 hours. I mean, Bitcoin's price deviates from the stock market for 2 weeks. I'm still not saying there's a disconnect. You give me it for a year and I might start talking about that. But it did start off initially that actually, although it fell, we were still above 80,000. I think we were around about 83,000. And we managed to sort of hold 80, bounce back up, and went into the weekend. Everything shut off. And then we get to sort of tea time, UK time on Sunday. And then suddenly, the futures markets start to open. We start to see what's going to happen. Asia takes over overnight for the UK. And by the time we wake up, Bitcoin has just caught up with the rest of the market. And we'll have a look at some of the charts a little bit later on. But it has been pretty much a devastating, effect on the markets. Massive price drops. I think, things like the S&P, I think things like the Russell 2K have technically fallen more than 20% from their all-time highs. So are now actually in bear market territory. How long they stay in there for, we'll have to wait and see. But the sharpness of that fall, I think, it does give us some pause for encouragement, which we'll talk about later on. And it's not been a steady fall over months and months and months. It's been, we've started to lose our all-time high. Looked like it was going to be a bit of a healthy correction. Grey swan event occurs. Big, steep drop off. VIX goes through the roof, which we'll talk about in a moment. Just giving us an opportunity for a very strong recovery should that take place. But the circumstances are certainly there for it to happen. The big unknown is what's going on with China, and what Trump's going to do with the rest of the nations. Now, for those of you that didn't bother to look into it, and that's no dig, the Trump tariffs list, you can actually go in and see all of the different countries and how he's done it. And I can't really explain to you how he worked out the percentage of shares of US imports that the Trump administration pulled together to then determine what their tariffs were going to be. But effectively, you can kind of see in the purple box on the right hand side, the size of all the tariffs that will now be levied against each nation. Ignore China. We're going to talk about that in a second because that one is wrong. But these are some large figures here. European Union, 20%. China was 34, which was large then. It's got even larger now. Japan, 24. Vietnam, 46. Taiwan, India, you get it. Some are down at 10. And what's interesting is, like Switzerland, 32%. Brazil, 10%. I think the UK got a 10% as well. It's all done in alphabetical order from now on, so I won't bother scrolling all the way to the end of it. But there's plenty of them that are sort of above 20%. And when we get into things like China, because of what China did, the 34% was announced on China. China then put their own reciprocal tariffs on the United States. And so the United States have come back now. They've added a further 50% on top of it. And the press secretary did confirm today that as of midnight tonight, it would be 104% tariffs on China. Now, that is going to create a huge problem. It may not create a huge problem, day one for Donald Trump, but you think about the amount of goods that go from China to the United States. And I understand what Donald's trying to do in the long term, which is bring manufacturing and bring all of these, companies back into the United States. But initially, that's going to be a very difficult pill to swallow for retailers in the United States, because they're going to suddenly have massive tariffs imposed upon everyday items that they used to get to. So I think, whilst I understand why he's done the tariffs, and I get from a geopolitical point of view what he's doing, and I get the tinfoil hat side of things in terms of, trying to refinance that massive amount of debt. For me, the reality of it is that, he's gone in on an election promise to say, look, I want to bring all of these companies, I want to make American dream again, I want to make America great again, all that kind of stuff. And that's great until you start pinching the pocket of the everyday citizen. And I think we're going to feel that. I say we, the United citizens of the United States, are going to feel that very quickly, particularly if China doesn't back down. Now, again, listening to the White House press secretary, and I can't remember her name, she talked about the fact that Trump has actually said he is more than happy to start having those negotiations with China, but China have to come to him for that. He is not, whilst he'll be willing and courteous and willing to listen to what they have to say, he is going to still continue with the best interests of the United States. So he's already started off on a strong footing with that. President Xi, I'm not sure how he is going to necessarily react, but in my mind, you've got two very strong personalities, polite way of saying it, coming to negotiate. I'm not sure who's going to want to be the loser out of those two. So could be an interesting scenario there, but I do think they will come to some sort of resolution. And hey, it's Donald Trump. We might actually get him just announcing tomorrow, you know what, we've sorted it all out. The tariffs are all off. Because there are apparently 70 countries that have already contacted the White House and are willing to start negotiations. So a lot of those 70 countries, I don't know the list of what they are, of who they are. How much they are importing into the United States could be minimal. So maybe it doesn't have that big of effect. I think we really need some of the big players to start to come to the negotiation table. And if China can be knocked off that list, then I think there's a really good chance that this trade war might end relatively quickly. So there's a few things that have come in here. So let's have a look. The tariffs on Canada steel, was last week. Everything is part of the signing he did with the big board that goes into effect tonight. Yep, okay, there we go. Everything but the Dow hit technical bears, I think. Okay, thank you for that, Mark. The tariffs were calculated on the trade deficit between the United States and the individual country. So if the US bought 30% more product compared to the UK bought from the US, the UK has a tariff of 30% and the reciprocal is 15%. Okay. Yeah, the execution skills of Liz Truss. Yeah, it's true. The one example that I've seen floated around was Australian beef. And I think it's something like $15 billion worth of Australian beef is sold in the United States. However, Australia doesn't allow any US beef. I don't know if this is true. It's just what I've seen people talk about. Who knows what's true coming out of Trump's mouth. It doesn't allow any beef to be sold, US beef to be sold in Australia, because they're looking to try and protect their farmers and etc. And I can kind of see that point of view. Well, wait a second, why do we give you, open doors to our markets? And I assume America has a pretty decent cattle market. Hey, I've only watched Yellowstone season 1 and 2, but it looked like it was a good market out there. Anyway, I digress. So there was definitely some unfairnesses that I'm sure he's just trying to use his strength to try and resolve. But what's that do for us? Unfortunately for us, we're just getting kicked around a little bit. And we're actually starting to see, even infighting within the government on how they're necessarily handling these tariffs, which will be interesting to see how it plays out, because I'm sure, like with every organization, there is, there's always, while there may be a central message you want to go down the line of, there are going to be key parties within the organization that don't agree on how they're executing that. And maybe that's going to have some impact on how that's dealt with. Chris, you do have a good point there. The US beef is treated with stuff, and that is a problem for other countries. I get that. I don't think Donald cares, but I do get what you're saying there. I talked about the VIX a couple of times, end of last week and then the beginning of this week, because it's something that, we don't really look at too much, mainly because we focus on the cryptocurrency market, and we have our own fear and greed indicator, if you will. But the VIX is a very good fear and greed indicator. Typically, it's sort of like sub 20. And if it is, then market's generally good. If you start to see it get into sort of 20 plus, there are concerns that the market is getting a bit worried about the risk and sort of maybe looking to offload. Above 30, we would say that there is fear in the market, and you see these really big spikes going 40 plus. Then we're at levels of absolute extreme fear, and we saw that at the close on Friday. We got to 45, which is why I wanted to point it out. And then actually over the weekend, it gapped up to 60, and it has come back down to sort of 40 at the moment. But these sharp moves up just illustrate the level of fear caused by that uncertainty across the markets. And so I've put this on the chart at the moment. I mean, it's gone back up to 54 in the last couple of hours. This is on the 2-week time frame, just so I can try and squeeze everything in here. And the 60 is where it gapped up into. But there's actually only, if you go on Discord, I've actually done a thing on it, but including this one, 4 occurrences in the last 17 years where we've got this high. With the great financial crash, we had lockdowns in 2020, we had the carry trade unwind last year, and then we've had what happened this time. Why do I signal these out? These sharp intakes, they didn't necessarily mark the bottom of massive drops in the market, particularly in this one. In 2008, because this happened, I think the peak happened at the beginning of October in 2008. The markets didn't actually bottom until March 2009, so there's a little bit of a lag on this time frame. But when you go to the more recent ones, the more recent 3, they actually are within a week marking the bottom of markets, and you can see sort of massive spike up as everyone gets out of the position because they just flee to cash because they don't really know what's going on. That uncertainty drives them that way, and then it's just a steeper recovery back down as the markets settle back down. And we actually see that in each occurrence that happens, the market's within, I don't know how it was for the great financial crash, but certainly in the last 5 years, within 6 months, we're back at all-time highs, and off they went. And it's still a fact. It is a absolute 100% record fact that the stock market has recovered every single crash it has ever encountered. I suppose with the exception of this one right now, because we haven't had the opportunity to do it. So if you give yourself a long enough time frame, the stock markets are going to recover themselves. And that's why that saying, when there's blood in the water, buy, buy, buy. When the VIX is high, you buy. And I did buy some on Friday. Bitcoin went lower and I bought some more. But, just in the general scheme of where I want to be buying Bitcoin or how I want to manage my Bitcoin purchases, that seemed like a logically safe move. I didn't buy any alts, but I was happy to buy Bitcoin from that level. But yeah, so this is just an indicator of risk and of uncertainty. And as I said, the tariffs play a part in that because we don't know where the effects of that are going to be felt and for how long they're going to be felt. But why do we suddenly just leave why is people just moving out to cash? And it's because we're in earnings season reports. So we're starting this week. We're going to it always starts each earnings season with pretty much the banks. They start it off. So this week, it's next week, sorry. Yeah, this week, actually, we've got BlackRock and JP Morgan. And next week, we've got majority of the other banks coming through. But then after that, towards the end of April, beginning of May, we're going to start to have, other companies that have products that may well be subject to these tariffs start to give us an indication, not only of how they've done this year, but forecast how they're going to, this quarter, where they're going to go next quarter. And there's some concerns that people are going to miss targets, which is going to help to drive the price down. So I just checking the score. And so, that makes sense as to why people are moving out. So I'm not going to go through these, but, this is another hurdle that we don't normally have to look at because we don't really care about earnings reports when the general stock markets are going up and everything's in the green and profits are still being recorded. but it may cause more concern towards the end of the month if people are missing their earning reports, blaming it on the tariffs. The tariff war's still going on. There's no end in sight of that. It's all hypotheticals, I accept. So just something that we may want to keep an eye on, because this will have a knock-on effect in crypto. And if you don't believe me, old Sailor's getting ahead of this. He's actually already saying that Strategy, I have to remember to call them Strategy, not MicroStrategy. One, they've stopped their weekly buying of Bitcoin at the moment because, you know, they're concerned with where the market is. But they're also disclosing that they're going to have a near $6 billion of unrealized loss for Q1. And that was based on Bitcoin's price at like 84,000. Bitcoin's price stays at 77. Could be a hell of a lot lower. So, you know, we talk about, and I'm not suggesting that if Bitcoin hits 67,000, Strategy is going to get liquidated or anything like that. No, doesn't bother me. But you've got to remember that what has Saylor done with his infinite money glitch over the last 6 months or so? He has been diluting shares to buy more Bitcoin. And now those people are going to be like, earnings report time, how are we doing? Wait a second, we're massively in the red. And so they may get nervous and they may sell up. I mean, that might be a reality of where we find it, and then they're just going to get hit further. So we don't know, but it, you know, we always look to Strategy and to Michael Saylor as, you know, the best policy when it comes to Bitcoin. Buy whatever price. I get it. I do it myself, and I'm much smaller scale, obviously. But when we're talking about earnings reports, we're talking about investors, we're talking about institutions, you know, and institutions do invest in Strategy. There could be some concerns, there could be some questions asked. And, it, you know, if suddenly Strategy have to start selling Bitcoin, and a lot of it, then, you know, what's that going to do to the fear of the rest of the market? Something that we need to consider. I mean, they have 528,000 Bitcoin, according to this, as of the 7th. Average purchase price for those that are interested is 67,458. But I do find it interesting he's already coming out ahead of this, trying to get on top. Okay, there's a few more things. Sports Future Horse Stud, what a great name. China has turned the tap off with the United States for all the major rare earth minerals, not aggressively stopped the shipments, just buried the request in a huge pile of paperwork. Okay. And then Julia's answer is great YouTube name there. Love it. Well, there we go. Just one final thing on the tariffs, just to sort of, it has been a bit of a news. It kind of changes, you know, so much, certainly leading up to, we're just not certain on where it's going to go. So just, you know, just bear that in mind, that things can move very quickly. And I'll jump onto this. I think it's relevant to talk about it now, because what happened yesterday, wild movement, not just in the crypto market, but across the traditional market as well. You see, there was a rumor, and it wasn't a rumor. There was a dream that was made by an analyst. Not a dream, but, you know, wouldn't it be great if Donald Trump gave a 90-day pause on the tariffs? And that was suddenly picked up by CNBC, and it was deemed as fact, stated by the White House, put out on the air, and the markets pumped. And not just Bitcoin, although Bitcoin went, you know, from 75,700 all the way up to 81,000 in the space of 45 minutes before crashing back down. But also, look, you know, I mean, I've put, you got the S&P and you got the NAS here, similar kind of movements over the same thing. You know, we went down from 4,800 to 5,200, and from 16,500 to above 18,000. And trust me, those size moves on the traditional markets are wild. $2 trillion worth of money flooding back in within 30 minutes based off a rumor of an unverified source about pausing the tariff. Why do I mention this? Because the reason I'm saying is you've got to be careful about not catching a knife here. There is obviously interest in getting back into the market, and any tidbit of information is going to be picked up upon and acted upon. And when the truth comes out that maybe trade deals are going to be agreed and hammered out and stuck to, and the trade war may end, then if you're still on the sideline, you may miss a great opportunity to get in. So don't be too, when you're thinking about sticking your head in the sand, don't have it in there so deep that you can't hear what's going on, because this could happen very quickly. Now, it did turn out to be a rumor. The markets were corrected, and we're now falling back to the levels that we were at that stage. But it was wild how quickly it is, and I think this is it. The exact term I would use: ready to ape in. It feels like it is recklessly ready to move without any really thought about what's going to happen. So bear that one in mind, please, as you're going forward. All right, let's have a look at some charts, shall we? And the score. Go on. Okay, right. Still 1-0. Mark's put Fox News interview picked up by Twitter account followed by Biz News, but misinterpreted an answer given about tariff wars. Yeah, I mean, I saw it and I was like, well, where's the source? Great. Went on to Donald Trump's Truth Social, nothing on there. And then by the time I'd sort of done that, we were already correcting. Anyway, back into sort of the chart, the standard chart we always kind of have a look at. And we were talking last week about, I know it's a bit busy in here and I apologize, but we're going to go through it. We were talking about this fib level and just bouncing up and down off this fib level between these two. And we really hammered it. And then obviously Sunday night, we've fallen through and away we've gone. And these are 12-hour candles here. So, as I say, Friday when the markets were dumping, Bitcoin really didn't do too bad. And so we closed on Friday at about 83, 84,000. Didn't do anything too much over the weekend. And then it was Sunday that we dropped, nearly 10,000. And then we're at 12% or whatever it was at the time, losing that. But what is interesting is what we talked about, these now grayed out boxes. These were the liquidation levels that we were talking about across the heat maps. And we were just saying that, I was saying, for me, that 84 was looking absolutely delicious to take out. So what did they do on Wednesday? Just prior to the tariff announcement, Wednesday afternoon, they fired it all the way up. Then tariff was announced at like 9 o'clock UK time, I think. Crushed it all the way down, so close that one off here. And then it was next to this one to be targeted. And, obviously this would have run here. And it's just gone straight through there. And it's absolutely cleaned those out. And it's another tail you can have a look at. Another 200 billion in liquidations in 60 minutes or whatever. I mean, I don't know where this money is coming from, because the amount of liquidations is happening is pretty darn wild. And then, I was kind of hoping, I thought, right, it's an Avenger call day. We've had a green day. But when we have a look at some other charts in a moment, you kind of see that actually there's some reasons here. And this on the 4-hour was really looking like it was probably going to be a dead cat bounce. And then what have we seen actually happen? The markets have come crashing back down, and we're down at 76,600 as we stand at the moment. Now, there isn't really too much in terms of liquidation heat maps building up. There's some at 85, which I've not really drawn on. There's a little bit here, but the move up and down has been so swift. We've kind of cleared out some of these levels. And so, down at 70K, there's not too much. It's a little bit at 75, but we got at 85 and then at 90. So I've not drawn the 85 back on, but it is interesting that, effectively what we've done is we've just done this. I mean, not the most accurately drawn, but you get the picture. Just built this up one now. We've got the one at 90, but we don't really have anything down here. We can get rid of this one as well whilst we're here. But for me, we almost retouched this. Remember, this 73,749 is pretty much the all-time high back from this time last year. We almost came down and retested it. We're only $700 away from that, so it's as good as a retest, in my opinion. And what I was thinking was, we're talking about, V reversal. Sharp move back down, started to be a strong bounce back up. I thought, great, maybe there is a reverse, but the speed just unfortunately wasn't there. We started to taper off on the lower time frames, and now unfortunately what looks like is happening is we're coming back down. And I do think that based on what we're seeing right now, unless there is some news that the trade war is over, I can see at least a retest of that 73,700 level, of where we may potentially, unfortunately, end up. Now, let's take it a little bit back a stage. Let's go on to the higher time frames, and let's just have a look where we are on the weekly. What's the one we want to do? Well, let's put the 50 EMA on the weekly, and we are riding it right now. There's no other way of explaining it. That's our bull or bear market indicator, yeah, you can slightly dip below it. Of course you can. Maybe spend a week below there, but you do not want to spend too much time. Last time we hit this, which was only a month ago, we bounced pretty strongly from that. We find ourselves sitting here again right now. And for me, this is a bit of a do or die kind of moment into potentially where we may end up going. So that's something to certainly bear in mind. And then when we have a look at some of the other levels, we think, okay, well, let's take the all-time high of the previous one, of where we may be going, sort of 69,000. Obviously, I know it goes a little bit slightly higher than that, which is actually an area that I think is kind of interesting, because if I now zoom back in, for me, the one area that I'm looking at, I don't think this is on the weekly, I don't know the exact, I think it's about 67,700. It's this weekly candle here from the 4th of November of last year. It's the Trump pump. So it's the election results where we moved. I think that's a huge psychological level. It's a string in Bitcoin's bow at the moment that we have managed to stay above that. A retest of that one, or a breaking below and closing below that one, I think that's going to be, I'm not saying it's game over, but I think it's going to be some difficult times for us, if it's not already, in terms of just from a psychological point of view, what that's done to Bitcoin's price. Let's not even consider what it's going to do to altcoin prices. But that's sort of where I would be looking. There's obviously a lot of noise in and around there, but and you just zoom right out, and I mean like right out. Does anything look that bad on this? I appreciate there's bear markets within this, but even in the bull market that we've seen since 2023 start off, we've come down to that 50 EMA on several occasions, and we've retested it. We've managed to climb to another all-time high from that one. So I think there's opportunity there to just sort of say, you know what? I know it's been tough. I know it's not looking necessarily pretty, but there's a good chance actually that, we will sustain this. Yeah, we might fall below by, 5% or so, whatever. But on the weekly, zoomed out, seeing that kick from that one. And I think if you do, you probably can't see where I'm going to start this line from, but let's try and tidy this one up. There's a bit of a trend line here, which I go multiple seasons worth of Bitcoin. And I'm not saying that this is a base support breach here. I'm more just giving it from a little bit of pinch of sugar here, trying to give us a bit of hopium, I suppose, that there is some sort of long-term trend line that just logarithmic chart, I accept, which kind of sort of suggests that, we may end up coming down here, which at the moment 67,000, if we were to drop down there for the next week or so, kind of going back to the Trump pump kind of level, where when we have hit it, we've never dropped below this. Doesn't mean we won't, of course, but potentially there's some sort of opportunity to have a look at from there. Hell yes, the markets are desperate to rip upwards. Yeah, they are. And totally agree, Harry. BTC retesting at 70 degrees, pretty standard stuff. Cycle to go. I mean, it is. We go back onto, what do we want to see if we are doing, let's do it on a clean chart. Let's do it on this one. Let's put it onto even a daily. I mean, this could still be a W. It could still be a W on the daily, potentially. We go on the 4 hour. What do we want to see here? We want to see, ideally, staying above 75,000 and then being able to sort of rip up. That'd be great. It's quite tightly packed together, so maybe not the best on the hourly. I think it probably does look a little bit better in terms of what we're going to say. But yeah, a retest there, find some strength to take it from that one. But let's start this from the daily and just have a look at where things are. And again, all lines really kind of look back to stuff we've talked about so many times. 50 EMA has held us back since the middle of February. We saw that move up there on Wednesday with the pre-tariff announcements. And what did we reject from? The 50 EMA. What did we actually close just below? 200 EMA. Sorry, no, we closed way below that, so that's where we opened. Apologies for the day before. But even since then, we couldn't clear the 20. And then all of today and yesterday's upwards movement has really done is got us back to the 10. And then we've just been knocked back down. And so, simple levels for us of what we need to get above. Why won't that do multiple? 81 to 82 700 without a fib even, they would be levels that I'd want to see us break above. And then what we've really got, well, by the time we get there, is a 250. I'm not calling it a death cross. I'm just saying that will be a monster confluence that we'd then end up needing to break through, which would probably be somewhere around about 85k in the sort of the next couple of days, week or so, for us to have to think and try and get through. Now, when we look at some of the vectors on the daily, this one from the Trump pump, which back in January, we hesitated to talk about it because we didn't want it to get down that low. We did talk that maybe it was potential. That's why that 70k level was kind of where we were at. The reality of where we find ourselves now, this one is, there's nothing else really around for it to go towards. So yeah, this how far it gets into it, but let's just say it's even the 50%, 72,500 feels like a level that it could really want to sort of try and attack now. And just a lot of people, imagine it from a psychological point of view, just realized you probably couldn't see this, but people get excited from Trump, come back into crypto and round trip it all the way back down. I'm not saying it's going to send crypto back or Bitcoin back, but it certainly is going to be difficult pill to swallow. Now, I know about 4 weeks ago, we talked about fair value. Fair value for Bitcoin was estimated to be around about 70,000. It was 69 back then. It's probably climbed up to about 70, 71,000 at the moment. BlackRock haven't really been buying over the last couple of days, but they haven't sold either. There's been no movement on the accounts today either, but that could still change. But yeah, institutions looking to offload over the last 3 days, with the exception of BlackRock that have bought. But there is. I asked someone to send me some of the order books. Thank you very much for sending them across. I haven't got them loaded up to have a look at. But there are still buy orders. There's still people wanting to buy down at sort of like the low 70,000s. And yeah, of course, people have got buy orders at 10 grand because they'd love to buy it there. But the reality of it is that the smart money is just waiting for price to get down into that. And we saw that through the high 70s last week as well, and they all got hit. They still need to sort of clear those buy orders out. So there are still some in 60k region as well, but let's just focus on those ones at the 70. And I would not be surprised for us to see it get back down there. And the reality is going to be that it will get back to its fair price. It doesn't mean it will automatically bounce from that fair price, but Bitcoin is just what people are willing to pay for it. I'm going to come back to the charts in a moment, but whilst we're talking about it, the sentiment is still in extreme fear. 24 seems quite high, actually, compared to what we're seeing. It's down as 19 on the CMC, but if you want to see a real fear and greed index, the stock exchange is at 4, which is kind of wild. I don't know the last time it ever got that low. How can I see timeline? Can I extend this? I thought I could. 19. It's only doing the last year. I was hoping to see it over several years. But anyway, level 4. So we are right at the peak of fear. And I'll always stand by. We might not be able to catch the bottom of it, but buying at these levels will historically probably be a good thing. I actually ended up buying some NVIDIA yesterday for my pension. It was sub 90. I bought it at 112. Felt wrong not to at least buy a little bit more, just on that sentiment of, yeah, I know it can go lower, but it's a good company. It's got a good pipeline of work coming through. It's got a lot of business whenever things start to pick up again. And so, yeah, if I can get an opportunity to get it at this level, I feel like I'd be foolish not to. Anyway, sorry, back to Bitcoin. So I'm just waiting for some of these to load up. Again, down on the 4 hour. This was what I was talking about with, we had this move down. It was climbing back up, but then we just started to lose it. This was where I was like, I think we're going to roll. And we did. We've rolled over from that. Ignore where we rolled. It's just the fact of how we've seen it. We wanted the V reversal with strength. And it almost had it, but you would argue that this, tall wick out of this green vector probably showed you that actually things were significantly slowing down. And yeah, okay, we kind of started to give it up one last throttle, but ultimately ended up rolling over. They may well be news related. I don't know. So we have a look at some alts. I think 45 minutes in, some of you might have been scared off already, so it's probably the best time to have a look at some alts. We'll start with BitTensor. And for me, BitTensor's problem, just from a charting point of view, is the fact that actually we haven't got above the 20 EMA since the middle of February, or certainly since March. We haven't been able to even make it today, and actually it's the 10 EMA again on the daily, which is kicking us back down here. And we are kind of getting to, if we just, this was the level from the drop in August, and as I say, we almost got there. We can't find some reason to turn around right now. This is going to get re-hit 162, absolutely. And after that, I don't really like talking about it because I don't want to scare anyone too much. But what is there? It was such a strong move up from sort of like 50 to 380. There isn't really much in way of sort of holding off. So if we're going on previous price action or trap vector cans or whatever, you got something around the low 100s. So I think we've really got to be cautious with what we're doing there. And I mentioned at the beginning about how we manage this and what do we do? Selling right now the best thing to do, trying to catch a falling knife. Not always, of course, but I've gone to cash, not for everything. I'm still in Tau, still in some of the other alts, but I have massively reduced my position over the last 8 weeks, 6 weeks probably, just because things haven't felt right in altcoins. And some of that money I have put into Bitcoin, I accept, and Bitcoin price has gone down, but it feels like a safer play for me than that. And my thought process, one, obviously, is just how Bitcoin dominance is doing versus alts. Two, I was very, very heavy. Over 50% of my portfolio was in Tau, and it just wasn't playing ball for me. And I'm more than happy to step out. Bear in mind, I sit in front of the charts most of the time. Step out, knowing how quickly I can get back in, but being able to just make that decision. And one of the things I would just stress people to have a consideration for is not always just going with the grass will always be greener kind of attitude, because that's the attitude that's going to get you into trouble when you get to the peak of the bull market as well. So just being able to make decisions that feel uncomfortable and accept you're going to be uncomfortable by not being in the position, sometimes is better than just sitting and riding things out. Now, I've hedged myself by not fully moving out, I accept, but that felt like the right play to do. Sticking with Tau on the lower time frames, there's no other real good picture. I mean, again, another rollover from here. 50 EMA holding us back on the 4 hours, been a strong resistance, really. I mean, the 50 EMA is what we've played. Oh, we go. No, I'll take that back. I was going to say on the 4 hours what we've played, but actually it's jumped over it a few times. But, since we saw the problems in February, it's obviously held quite well from it. And I just see these two vector zones here. So, 174 as an area that I would certainly be looking to. But I just don't feel comfortable in buying alts right now. That is my honest opinion of where it's going. I would feel more comfortable in buying Fartcoin right now and just trying to take a short-term play on that. SPX, although it has dropped 16% today, it's had some wild movements, hasn't it? Up and down, up and down. So there's been some hell of an opportunities there, and I'm sure some other meme coins, except for Trump and Melania, have an opportunity. But I would feel better in some of these ones than perhaps in buying into any others. So that's just my opinion right now with where I sit with alts in general. And if you want to have a look at the king of alts, you have a look at Ethereum, and it is just horrendous. And I don't use that word as a lightly or as a joke. I've marked on the bottom here 1142. So 1,142 was the price of Ethereum at the peak of the bear market in 2022, November 2022. We are what? 20% away from that? Next to nothing really. In terms of it's fallen 22% this week. And it's just really struggled. And I think it's a true reflection of where the vast majority of altcoins have been over the last 6 weeks or so. I mean, that's probably actually doing a disservice to a lot of altcoins, because Ethereum's been pretty terrible for the whole of this bull run. But what I would say gives me a little bit of hope for anyone that is still holding Ethereum is the speed at which this has fallen. Unlike Tau, this has actually left, even on the daily, plenty of vector candles for it to potentially move back up to, maybe see some sort of move back up before a further rejection down, just clearing out some of these levels. So could be opportunity there to potentially look at getting out if that's a position that you want to take. Sorry, I didn't really go through Tau. I just don't know if there's too much really to talk about with some of these. Like, the problem with alts, I suppose, right now, yes, hindsight TA can show us some things, but do you really have the courage right now to take a move on an altcoin based off TA, knowing that the rest of the traditional financial markets are teetering on the edge? No idea what Donald Trump's going to do when he opens his mouth. We haven't even talked about his CPI data tomorrow. So that should be interesting to find out how the economy's really doing in inverted commas. And so I just don't think that TA is the one reason that I would ultimately buy an altcoin. Now, if you truly believe in an altcoin, I know Simon does, I know a lot of people in the group just look at it as a long-term play. I'd love to buy some Tau sub 200. Then, hey, that's not TA, that's fundamentals. You love the project, then hey, I'd say go for it. Fill your boots. Feel like I'm doing with Bitcoin. I just happen to be doing the Bitcoin side of things because, one, I think it's always smart to have some Bitcoin. And two, I mean, even we did a Bitcoin play. This is Bitcoin versus Tau. Having more Bitcoin whenever the Bitcoin dominance decides to break and we go into a mini alt season, just convert it back in. And so that is the play that I would be looking to do. I'm just now scrolled down to have a look. So actually the NAS is falling again quite strongly, actually. We got 40 minutes till the markets close, I think. It'll be interesting to see how that one ends up closing. I don't know if any news has been talked about or anything else from there. I don't know, is there anything anyone wants me to have a look at whilst I'm here? Otherwise, I think I'll probably just call it a day. No news, just markets falling into the close. Okay, thanks, Mark. And yeah, I think maybe, with confirmation that the reciprocal tariffs start at midnight tonight, there's been no word from the White House of any delay or anything. The reality of those are setting in. Maybe that's leading to just further concern and panic in the market place of where we're going. I mean, let's just take the NAS weekly. Might have to do you know what? We'll do it now. I'll do it on a clean chart. Too many vector zones there. Yeah, open anyway. Weekly. Might have to put it on the 2 weekly. I don't know, maybe not. Only goes back to 2015, this chart for me. I mean, what are we at now? We're at sort of like peak of the market. November 2021 is where we find ourselves. That's actually where we bounce from, isn't it? Today, or this week, should I say. And then, from that, we had that sort of, see what I was talking about with, where's the indicator? Let's get price on date. So this, this bear market, if you will, took 315 days to drop 37%. Whereas this one, from the peak, we've dropped 26%, but in only 50 days. That much sharper drop, which looks very much akin to what happened when we had the global lockdowns in March 2020. Massive sell-off with the uncertainty, and then it sort of managed to recover. And going back to that picture of the VIX, there was no spike up to above 45 during this period in the VIX, which is here. Nothing. I mean, it gets to 40. I mean, it's still a high level, don't get me wrong, but that's because we were in a bit of a bear market. but those big spikes and then the reversals, the strong, fast reversals come when you get even higher. So, that's sort of my glimmer of hope that I sort of hold on to. That's what we've seen. We've seen a very sudden sell-off, 50 days to lose 26%. I mean, what is it, like 9 trillion being wiped off the stock markets or something in that period? I don't know why I'm laughing. And so, that kind of says at some stage, and these are weekly candles, so it's not, it takes a while to turn around. I mean, this took from bottom, let's do it again, to getting back up to where it was. It took 70 days. So it took, I can't remember what I said now. 35 days down and then double the time back. So it's not like it will be recovered tomorrow. And this trade war may take a couple of weeks to resolve. There's some big decisions that need to be made there, and two big characters to eat some humble pie and get it sorted. But, even if what this has shown us is strong moves down like this don't last forever. Even if it's a relief bounce, we will see some sort of recovery. And it's just, I think it's going to be very news driven as to whether or not we get out of that. Just my 2 cents there. S&P could close below 5,000 for the first time in this year. Okay. Oh, in a year. Yeah, it didn't close below it last couple of days. It's got an hour. Well, not even an hour. It's got 35 minutes. I mean, it's the futures one, so. But absolutely get what you're saying there. Right. Rambled on for 56 minutes. I think that's probably enough. Thanks for tuning in. Just a couple of notes. There's no trading pub this week, and I don't think there's an Avenger call next Tuesday night. I'm away at Center Park, so I've just got no way of, one, looking at stuff during the day to talk about, or two, really being able to have a private conversation with you all without my kids running around in the background. So unlikely to be one next week. Obviously, I'll still be around, commenting or what have you during that time. But, just final point really is just going back to what I said at the beginning. Look, if you're stuck within it and you're paralyzed in what to do, then just maybe it is just best to sort of like take a breath and take that opportunity just to sort of like wait to see what happens. Things can happen so quickly in terms of what's going to change around. But at the same time, don't just think, I'll ride this one out, because there will have to come a tipping point where you're going to have to make a decision. Otherwise, you're going to be in a position where some people are locked in ohm and time, thinking, I'll just ride it out and it'll recover, and it never did. Just be aware of what your particular circumstances are and just act around it. That's probably the best I can give you. Sorry, Miss Stackers put, if it closes below 5k, then it'll likely come back to reclaim the imbalance for Monday, which would mean another 2.7% down. With any luck that happens in the Asia markets. There's a lot to digest there, but effectively what Mr. Tacos is saying, I don't have it on. Don't have the markets on my. I don't know. Wait, one more time frame. No, I don't. So the Asian, so obviously the US market will close in about 30 minutes. It's sort of like a Brinks period or a sort of market close period. Then the Asian markets open. I don't know technically when they open. Does it start with Sydney or does it start with Tokyo or Hong Kong? I don't know. But they're going to open for the UK around about 11:30 at night, maybe 12:30. I can't remember where we are with British summertime. And looking to try and let me get the NAS on. So is that 2.5% from there? Let me have a look. Oh, I don't have my screen on, do I? Sorry. I'm in this. It's a bit close from here. It is a 2.5%. You're right. So what they're saying is maybe look into then head back down here. I mean, it's on the 4 hour. Have we got some vectors? I mean, yeah. Look, I would argue there's a wick there. It may look to come down to, which would be from its current position, almost 2.5%. So that's sort of where we're looking. Potentially of it moving towards that one. But anyway, right. I'm gonna just call it there. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I know it's a tough week, and it may be another tough week as well. We may be in for a couple of tough weeks, but we've been through this before. We've been through it in bear markets, and for those of you around in 2021, there was that mid-cycle dump, 50% on Bitcoin that we managed to get through. And I promise you, we were all smiling again in November of 2021, but we were crying in May of 2021. So it's something we've experienced before. Enjoy the rest of your evening if you can. Enjoy the rest of your week. Obviously, I won't catch you next week, but I will be around on Discord throughout this week and next week. And I'll see you in a few weeks. Speak to you all soon. Cheers now.